You've heard this a million times before, but Anthony Edwards is the Michael Jordan of our generation. We've seen our fair share of new age shooting guards coming and going and getting compared to His Airness. Throughout the past 30 years, there have been a few shooting guards and wings entering the league with high expectations on their shoulders because people thought they were ready to become the face of the next generation, or in this case, the next coming of Michael Jordan. MJ ruled the 90s with his scoring, swagger, and style. He still is arguably the most iconic basketball player in the history of the game, even if you give your vote to LeBron James in the GOAT conversation. Because of that, there have been a lot of kids over the past 30 years wanting to be like Mike. But even if there were plenty of younger stars who entered the league looking like the next coming of His Airness, they never came close. The only players who actually came close were Kobe Bryant and Dwayne Wade, but they went on to become so good that they became icons themselves. Meanwhile, the other Jordan wannabes fizzled out of the league early or were never really half as good as Mike. But things have changed over the past few seasons because the league is now more focused on the three-point shot.
In the double Ant-Man, Edwards, it's a three, good!
Players today now want to play a fast-paced game that relies heavily on their outside shots. This has led to the decline of the more methodical isolation mid-range game that made Jordan so famous during the 90s. Players like DeMar DeRozan and a few others still try to play the same way, but they never see the same kind of success that three-point heavy players do. This is why we don't see a lot of players getting compared to Michael Jordan nowadays. After all, most of these kids grew up in an era where everyone wanted to be like Stephen Curry. Despite that, we do know there is only one guy who's become the topic of a lot of conversations when it comes to His Airness. We're talking about Anthony Edwards, the young Minnesota Timberwolves star. He entered the league as a hungry and aggressive scorer capable of making outside jumpers while occasionally attacking the basket with thunderous dunks and other highlight reel quality plays. On top of that, he has a unique personality and swagger that a lot of people may find arrogant but quite magnetic. Ant's charisma, incredible athleticism, and superstar aura triggered a lot of flashbacks in old heads who watched basketball during the 90s. Of course, the man they remember is none other than Michael Jordan himself.
Zellers has Jordan. Jordan with 2 seconds to go, puts it up and scores at the buzzer!
Both players are incredibly athletic and similarly built, even though Jordan may be an inch or two taller. They both like talking smack and are great competitors in their own right. Of course, both players are also incredibly charismatic, capable of attracting media attention with a simple smile. It also helps that Edwards actually kind of looks like Jordan, so it's perfectly understandable that people will compare the two players or even make a bold proclamation that Edwards is actually MJ's lost son. As Anthony Edwards rose through the ranks as one of the best scorers in the league, the comparisons only grew. These comparisons reached their peak during the 2024 playoffs when Ant led the Minnesota Timberwolves to the Western Conference Finals. To that end, people could not stop talking about the similarities between the two players. On the other end of the stick, there are also people who didn't think there are similarities between the two players at all. After all, they come from different eras. Jordan played in an era when the mid-range game was king. He mastered the art of isolating himself on the high post, where he could play with his food and use a lot of different moves to gain separation for that mid-range shot. Meanwhile, Ant plays more like a blend of old school and modern basketball. He's a very capable pull-up shooter from the mid-range and is great at attacking the basket when he has an open lane. But he's developed his game to fit the modern trend, opting to shoot more three-pointers than mid-range shots. That's why it's understandable why some analysts and commentators don't see similarities between the two at all. Of course, Jordan also came into the league ready to take over, winning the scoring championship in just his third season at 23 years old.
MJ.
He also carried the Bulls on his back during his younger years, basically doing all the heavy lifting. Edwards, meanwhile, hasn't come close to winning a scoring title and isn't even in the MVP conversation. He's an elite player, no doubt, but as far as the elite of the elite are concerned, he still has a long way to go before he could get there. On the other hand, Jordan was already giving the elite of the elite a run for their money during his first few seasons in the NBA. So that's why there are some people who don't necessarily believe in the MJ and Ant comparisons. To be fair, we've also heard a lot of people comparing one player to Jordan only for MJ to dismiss the conversations by saying they're nothing alike. The only player he personally gave his stamp of approval to was Kobe Bryant, but only because he thinks the late Black Mamba stole all of his moves. Meanwhile, he didn't like it when people were comparing other players to him. Of course, Jordan is the embodiment of competitiveness. He isn't the type of guy who would say that one guy plays like him or that a certain player has qualities similar to his.
Loss in the series for the Sixers. Jordan again.
He's more of the type of man who always wants to be on top, not ready to admit that someone is as good as him. But in Edwards' case, it's actually cool that he didn't mind the comparisons at all. Sports commentator Chris Broussard, who claims that he's still close in touch with the GOAT, said that Michael Jordan personally told him that he sees himself in Anthony Edwards. According to Broussard, Jordan said there are similarities between him and Edwards. Basically, Broussard wanted to end the debate by saying if Jordan thinks he and Ant are similar, then no one else can tell anyone otherwise. So for Jordan to say that he sees himself in Edwards is the greatest stamp of approval the young man could get. Of course, we've never really heard MJ saying that in person, but that's probably the closest we could get at this point in the NBA, especially because His Airness usually reserves his compliments to the elite of the elite. What that basically means is that Ant still has a long way to go before he can actually live up to the hype of being this generation's Michael Jordan.
Edwards gets it back and threw it down.
That will take a long time, considering that he hasn't won anything meaningful as far as an individual and team-based awards are concerned. Yes, he's an all-star and is one of the best young American basketball players. He's also an all-NBA talent, but he's never been close to leading the league in scoring and isn't even in the MVP conversation. While he may have the GOAT's blessing, he's still down on earth, far from the pantheon of greatness that Jordan, LeBron, Kobe, and all those other great players have reached. But that doesn't mean he won't get there. As Kendrick Perkins once said, he expects Anthony Edwards to lead the league in scoring. That's where the real conversation will start, because we know that all the truly great scorers in history have led the league in scoring, something Ant has yet to do. He's not even close to doing that, and this is where some people question whether or not he's actually a Jordan clone. Sometimes he lacks the aggressiveness and assertive nature that people want to see from a star of his caliber. He has a tendency to shrink when the defense focuses on him too much, opting to pass to his teammates or defer to the other stars.
By Edwards, 2-on-1. Randall takes it himself.
The worst part is that he seemingly has a knack for settling for outside shots instead of attacking the basket. And we know that all the truly great scorers would want to attack the basket first before settling for an outside jumper. So, for Anthony Edwards to live up to the hype, he needs to start being more aggressive. It starts by taking ownership over his team and becoming the uncontested alpha, something he often hesitates to do because he would rather allow Julius Randle to dribble and spin move his way to turnovers. Still, we've seen Edwards kind of become more accountable for his setbacks. In a win over the Washington Wizards on January 13, 2025, he scored 41 points, including 20 in the fourth quarter alone. And a few games before that, he scored a career-high 53 points against the Detroit Pistons. From the looks of things, he's steadily accepting the reality that he needs to take over and be the man on this team, especially now that the Minnesota Timberwolves are struggling to get an outright playoff spot. And once he starts becoming as aggressive as prime Michael Jordan, it's going to be all over for the rest of the league.